Hey guys, thanks for the click and welcome back. Today I'm going to engrave some wooden spoons for a customer. And rather than engrave them one at a time, I'm going to make a jig out of 1/8 inch MDF that's going to hold and align multiple spoons so I can engrave a whole bunch of them at the same time. That's going to speed up the process and make things a lot easier. But the first thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to make an outline of this spoon and also measure it. So let me go ahead and turn on the Mira 7 and the external compressor, and let's get this project started. Let's go.
Okay, I put my wooden spoons on the workbench and I grab my tape measure and I start to measure the widest part of the spoon. And it's just under 2 inches, 1 15/16 of an inch. I measure the widest part of a few other spoons and they're all measuring about the same, 1 15/16 of an inch. Now I decide to take the measurement of the length of the spoon. And it measures out to 11 3/4 of an inch. I will use these measurements later in the build. Now it's time for me to make an outline of the spoon that will help later with the alignment of the text. So I place a black piece of MDF on the laser bed and I place a spoon on top of the black MDF. The dark background will help out a lot when I take a picture of the spoon using the camera that is mounted on the lid of the Mira 7. And to access the camera, you go to your computer and you do a search on camera and find the camera app. Once you find the camera app, just click on it and it will open up the app and show the laser bed of the Mira 7. So all you have to do now is click the shutter button to take a picture of the spoon. Once the picture is taken, open up the app's gallery and locate your picture. Once you find it, copy the picture and paste it into the location where you can access it easily. I now open up Lightburn and I click on File, Import. I'm going to import the picture of the spoon. Before I opened up Lightburn, I cropped the picture. So I select the picture and I import it onto the work surface in Lightburn. I next zoom in a bit and I select the picture and I right click the mouse and I select Image Trace. An image trace window will now pop up and you will see the image traced in purple. You will also notice a lot of purple noise that would have been worse if I had not used the black background. I want to get rid of as much of the noise as possible to clean up this trace. So I move the threshold slide bar to the right to get rid of the purple noise. When satisfied, I click OK. I now click on the original image and I move it aside to expose the image trace. I will now select the photo and click delete, just leaving the image trace behind. By default, the image trace is grouped, so I right click and I select ungroup. When ungrouped, I begin to select and delete any of the trace that I don't need, just leaving the spoon. I now select the spoon and I rotate it 90 degrees. I then rotate it a bit to line up the long part of the handle to the grid lines, ensuring that it is at 90 degrees to the work surface. Now that I'm happy with the position of this trace, let me select it and check the actual size of it. When I look at the actual size of the width of the widest part of the spoon, it only measures 0.96 inches. It's supposed to be 2 inches based on the measurement I took with the tape measure. But no need to worry, I'll fix that later. So let me concentrate on making the first spoon hole for our jig. I now make a long rectangle and I position it over the widest part of the spoon, ensuring that the top of the rectangle reaches the straight part of the handle. I now adjust the rectangle until the sides kiss the side of the widest part of the spoon, as well as kissing the bottom side of the spoon. Now that I'm done with the bottom, let me make a long skinny rectangle that will align the handle of the spoon. I position the rectangle over the handle and I adjust the sides of the rectangle to kiss the sides of the spoon handle. It's okay that the top of the rectangle is higher than the spoon handle. This will allow the spoon to easily fit into the jig. Now for the next step, I select the skinny rectangle. I then hold down Shift, select the bottom rectangle, and I now want to join these two shapes together. So once selected, I move over to the left side of the screen and I select and click on the Boolean Union tool. Once clicked, it will join these two shapes together. I now select the newly joined shape, and since I will be cutting this shape out, I change the color to red. I now select the spoon outline and temporarily delete it to show you the newly joined shape. I now undo the delete and I select the spoon outline and I change it from black to the blue T2 tool layer. This tool layer will be used for text placement on the spoon. I now select everything and I group it all together. Now that I have finished making the main part of the spoon jig, I now have to resize it to the actual size of the spoon. And that's super easy. Just go up to the width and height window on the upper left part of your page. Make sure that the aspect ratio lock is locked. This will proportionally adjust the width to the height. So, since I want the widest part of the spoon to be 2 inches, just enter in 2 inches for the width and click enter. I have now resized the jig to fit the actual spoon size. That's it. So now I select everything to check the new sizes, and as you can see now, it is 2 inches wide by a little over 12 inches high, which will work out perfectly. So now it's time to finish this jig. I will select and move the grouped shapes to the left side of the page. Once selected, I go to the left toolbar and I select and click the Grid Array tool button. The Grid Array window will pop up, and I will have to make a few entries into the horizontal section of this window. Since I will be making this jig to hold 6 spoons, I will make my entries to reflect that number. I will want my columns to be 1.125 inches apart, so I enter in 1.125 inches for the X spacing. And I want 3 columns, so I click the X column until I have 3 columns. And since I want a total of 6 spoons in this jig, I will simply group and copy the 3 spoons and paste them to the work surface. I will now rotate the copied 3 spoons 180 degrees. I then position them between the first set of spoons. I now do a final alignment of all 6 spoons. I now want to make a frame around the spoons. Since I will be using a 12 by 19 inch piece of MDF, I want to make sure that one side of the frame is 11 inches so that it will fit on the MDF sheet. I now group everything and I do a center align. I now select the outer frame and I change the color to red since I will be cutting it out. I now select everything and I group it together. Once grouped, I rotate it 90 degrees. I now want to identify this jig, so I select the text tool and I label it Wooden Spoon Jig. I now want to change the color to blue. I will score this layer, so I will adjust the settings accordingly. So that's the final step to the jig design. All I have to do is send this job to the Mira 7 laser. I rename the file to Spoon Jig and I click OK. I now load a 1/8 inch piece of MDF onto the laser bed, and since alignment is not important at this time, I just eyeball it to be as square as possible to the X and Y axis. I position the laser head over the center of the MDF and I do an autofocus. I now move the laser head to the bottom right corner of the MDF to set my origin. Remember, I set the origin on the jig design to the bottom right corner. So when finally positioned, I press the origin button and now the origin is set. I will now frame the job. This will show the footprint of the actual size of the jig. I close the lid to the Mira 7, load the file to the controller, and I press start to cut this jig out. After the cut, I remove the jig and I take it to my workbench to do a spoon test fit. I place each spoon onto the jig, and each spoon is fitting nicely. This jig is going to work out great. I now place the jig on the laser bed, and since alignment will now be very important, I don't want the jig to be off square in either direction. So I'm now going to have to make sure that the jig is square to the laser head by using a 90-degree L jig that I made months ago. I position the L jig onto the laser bed where I know the spoon jig is centered on the bed. I place the spoon jig aside, and I will now move the laser head and position the laser pointer onto the L jig. I move the L jig until the laser pointer is riding on the edge of the Y axis. My goal is to have the laser beam right along the edge of the Y axis from top to bottom. I adjust as necessary until I am very satisfied that the laser pointer is riding the edge of the L jig from the very top to the very bottom of the Y axis. Now that I am satisfied with the placement, I lock down the L jig with high-powered neodymium magnets on both the Y and X axis. This jig is now locked down hard and will not move. I do a final alignment check on both the X and Y axis, and I am confident that the laser head is now square to the L jig. I move the laser head out of the way and I slide the spoon jig snugly into place onto the L jig. The spoon jig is now square to the laser head. I now move the laser pointer to the bottom right corner of the spoon jig to set the user origin. I slowly move the laser pointer until it is positioned onto the bottom corner of the spoon jig. I had to slow down the jog speed. Slowing it down will make this step a lot easier. Once I was satisfied with the placement, I pressed the orange origin button on the controller. The origin is now set. I now press the frame button, and if the alignment is correct, the laser pointer should ride along the entire edge of the spoon jig. Let's see how well I did. Well guys, it's looking like a perfectly aligned jig. It's now time to start masking the spoons and loading the jig. Let's go. I place a small piece of green painter's tape onto the bottom of each spoon. This will eliminate charring on the engraved surface. When done, I take them to the laser and I start to load each spoon onto the jig. Once loaded, I double check that the spoon jig is snug up against the 90-degree L jig. I now need to autofocus the laser again to the top of the wooden spoon, so I lower the laser bed by pressing ZU and pressing the right arrow button. I now move the laser head over one of the spoons, and then I press ZU and I move the cursor down to autofocus and I press enter. That's it, the laser is now autofocused and ready to go. Now let me go back to Lightburn so I can add some text to the spoons. I ensure that everything is grouped and I temporarily rotate the jig 90 degrees and I zoom in on one of the spoons. I now import some text that I designed earlier, and since I know exactly where my spoon outline is, I can precisely place the text exactly where I want it. No guessing, jigs make it easy. I now copy the text and I paste it to the two other spoons. I make some name modifications and I make some final alignment adjustments. And now I'm ready to rotate the jig 180 degrees and add text to the other three spoons. When done, I rotate the jig back to the original orientation that I started with. I now check the laser settings and I turn off all the layers except for the engraved layer. I do a quick preview of the job and I am now ready to send this job to the laser. I load the engraved job to the controller and I close the lid and I press start. The Mira 7 precisely starts to engrave the spoons exactly in the right spot. Using a jig for text placement will always give you the confidence that where you place it will be exactly where it will engrave it. So now that the first batch of spoons are done engraving, I will remove them and take them to my workbench for inspection. Once laid out, I grab a random spoon to examine, and the engraved looks amazing. It has great color and depth. I finish up the second batch and I place them on the table, and I begin to unmask all the spoons. And wow, they are really looking good. Well guys, that pretty much is going to wrap up this project. If you like what you see, please click on my AEON partner referral link below. You can read the details in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching. And until my next project, I hope you fire up your laser and laser up something amazing. So have a great day and see you soon.